Welcome back to the Maratha Confederacy Abridged, where in the previous part we took out the masterminds Dagestan, we started a war with Gran Columbia and took out a landing force from them at sea. We were also spamming Russia some more, and we've pretty much defeated them at this point, just need to finish them off. And finally, we're now facing Gran Columbia at Munich for some reason with a big army. It's a fort sally battle, and that will give us some protection from the enemy's artillery, since they're going to leave them in the middle there, and their line of sight is going to be blocked quite a lot. They will try and fire out, and occasionally I got hit by the odd shot. But anyway, what I was doing to start off with was charge here along the flank because an enemy general was exposed. It's not the enemy general as it turned out. I thought I was being very cheeky here, rushing in to take out their general as it started. But they actually had two generals, and the other one is just walking off somewhere towards the middle of the map. At least we are using here our Sipahi cavalry, who have super high melee stats as decent as a foot melee unit, plus a high charge bonus, so we can easily take that general down. There's the real general just walking about. So a good attempt at an early general snipe. Maybe we'll get the other one next time. The main thing we wanted to do here is use that group that just fought the general to outflank the enemy's infantry coming out of the fort. So a bunch of cav charges that infantry from the front, as we see here. That's not going to be all that effective, but again we are using some of our Sipahis who have both high melee stats as mentioned and a pretty high charge bonus. I think they had the same charge bonus as our usual Lancer cav. So we do inflict a decent amount of damage, and now we'll die a bit less in the ensuing melees than we've seen recently. And here comes our rear attack cav. They did get delayed, there was some gun cav back there, and I left some of them behind to deal with stuff. But this closing of the trap will finish off most of this main line of infantry. This isn't everything, of course, they're kind of spread out all over the map, as you can see on the minimap. But that's business attended to, really. Their general, their real general, dies somewhere back here. And with that, we've effectively won the battle. Everything's going to start routing. But there was a bit more fighting to be had. I had another group of cav on the other side of the map that weren't the Sipahis, so it's time for them to try and catch up. The Sipahis have annihilated their opponents. Now it's time for the Baghir Lancers to prove that they are not obsolete, even though they pretty much are. The Sipahis are better and cheaper than these guys. Looks like with their attack the enemy formed a little square. I doubt I actually noticed that while playing, so it probably took a bunch of losses. We're just slamming into things from the front at this stage. Looks like I am doing a bit of micro, trying not to fight those grenadiers from the front, but as the enemy are squaring up, we are for the most part just running into them. We're not even doing the thing where we split these units up and run from all directions, which is better. We're doing the micro-friendly strategy, and that is to just quickly select the unit group with a click and drag and tell them to attack. Minimum clicks, minimum me paying attention, and it still works at this point just because we can deathball the enemy. So we do that to everything that's left, and here is the result. Looks like it was fine, and because this is an isolated battle, losses are irrelevant anyway. These armies can be replenished at our leisure, and Gran Columbia are probably dead there now. Over in Russia, we stroll on towards the next distant target on the edge of the map, and there we just have a surrender, so that's one more place captured. I think there are two more to go at this stage. We've got a new national leader this turn, which is good because the previous one had a trait that was reducing public order among the lower classes. This one doesn't have that, so that's just going to make managing everything a bit easier. I think we might be a rare matriarchy type government. We've had 3 queens in a row as far as I remember. Anyway, more importantly, we need to bring down yet another Mughal Empire invasion. They're doing the classic set up with a port blockade in order to waste some time, giving me time to come in with the fleet and take them out. And there we get an auto-resolve with no losses, which is always helpful. That's another Mughal Empire army sunk to the bottom of that bay, sinking onto the top of a couple of other previously sunk fleets, no doubt. Now we've got a naval invasion of our own to arrange. I've got this stack here of Sipahis and guns, and I'm making a little fleet for them to use so we can depart Germany, and we'll see that in the next turn because I needed to wait for the next ship to come along. Then Gran Columbia have a fight for us. They decide to sally against us again. I should have auto-resolved them in the previous turn to kill them, but I completely forgot. So we're going to auto-resolve them now. I suspected that balance bar was completely lying. And it was, so there we go, that's the actual end of their European empire. And now we're going to think about doing something about their foreign empire. Gran Columbia are from South America, So that's why we've put all of these Sipahis in ships. We're going to send them off to go take a look at what's going on in the American theatre, and just hope we can steal some of their territory or something. In the meantime, we've got more action because the Mughal Empire have, again, the very turn after their previous naval defeat, done the exact same thing but with a slightly bigger navy. So I come back with my navy to attack them again. The balance bar's looking pretty good even though they have a few ships because their ships aren't that good. They do have some Zebeks though, which have unusually high stats for their ship class, which I was just checking out down the tooltips. Anyway, the auto-resolve's good enough for me. That's yet another Mughal Empire army killed. And then after that, I auto-resolved some Russian place I've had under siege and forgotten about for a while. I think I just couldn't be bothered to attack it, so I was waiting for them to die during the siege a little bit. We've killed them, and now there's just one more bit of Russia to take before all that is over. You might think we'd be done with the Mughal Empire invasions after defeating 2 in quick succession, but no, there was another one. And these guys slipped past my defences. I normally have guys blocking the Strait of Gibraltar, but I guess they were repairing or something for a turn. And they seem to have snuck through and invaded Corsica, the place we took from them a while ago, and now they're just back in there. I think I actually forgot to do anything about that, so they're just going to hold Corsica for now. Here's me finishing off Russia with just a quick auto-resolve in some distant corner. That's the end of them at last. There was an inconvenient turn-up when a bunch of pirate galleons blew up half of my trade fleets in South America. I'm just going to make a bigger one and go back there at some point, not that we actually need to at this stage. Here's a more important bit of naval action. My fleet carrying these Sipahis arrives at Gran Columbia's only settlement at Caracas. Looks like they've got some guys waiting outside. So I thought we could do a siege draw out here. Because they're standing on the beach, we can trigger a battle even though we're landing without a port. But for whatever reason, this doesn't trigger reinforcements from the adjacent enemy army. So we're just facing a half stack of stuff, basically. In this fight, they had some entrenched cannons that were focusing down my general. They're using my own tactics against me, so by firing on my elephants a few times, we took pretty heavy losses, especially because I didn't notice until my guys started wavering and the flag was flashing, so that's all good. But at least from the start of the battle, the enemy were retreating from their initial position and I was advancing, meaning my cavs soon arrive at their guns and there's nothing here to stop me, just jumping over the defences and taking out all of the crews right now. Their general comes over to investigate the situation and watch, I guess. This proves to be a bad move because some more cav arrive and charge him as well, and our Sipahis will easily take down General's bodyguards. The only thing is, as they move back, we need to be a bit careful here. Because this is an entrenched army we're facing, they've put down some anti-cav spike things. You can see their cav are allowed to jump over them. Our cav die if they try to move across, and I was actually paying attention in a radical twist. I pulled back before we chased them over the spikes. However, I'm sure you want to see some cav getting killed action, so luckily, here's what happened after that. A weak enemy unit came forwards on its own. I cav charged them to kill them, but this time I clearly wasn't paying attention. Maybe I was doing something else, because we actually did chase them right into the wall of spikes. At first it doesn't look so bad, but once we're done pushing the enemy out of the way, our horses try to get across the spikes and there's just sort of loads of glitchy, weird physics deaths going on. So we see a massive portion of one of our units get killed by this. Very nasty, should have been paying attention. At least as for the battle, we're going to be fine because I spent most of the time pulling a giant wing of cavalry all around the battlefield to hit the enemy from the back, in conjunction with our attack from the front here after dodging around the cav spikes. And that means these guys are in trouble. We've got cav just spewing all over the place like the many arms of Vishnu we punched through their formation. And that's going to be the end of Gran Columbia's first army. It's a shame this wasn't a siege draw out, because I'm sure we could have done some real damage. Instead, we've just killed one army and lost a bit of ours. If we hadn't gone through that anti-cav thing, that would have been an extremely good result. Anyway, unfortunately I can't start the siege of the town this turn, so we have to wait a turn to get the siege going. And basically nothing happens in Europe in the meantime, so we'll now just skip to when the enemy sallied out after a turn of siege. I was there trying to swap Florida for Sardinia with the USA, but they weren't interested in that apparently. So anyway, now we have a more decisive battle for Gran Columbia as everything else comes out to face us. I spotted some militia who were deployed separately from the rest of the enemy's army on the corner of this fort. Figured let's just throw one unit of cav against them. But it seems we're not in the days when a unit of militia will just rout if you charge them. These militia stand their ground. I'm guessing Gran Columbia have all of the techs because they're a descendant of a major faction. So maybe all those bayonet techs make the difference. Our Sipahis can't break the militia by just charging them, and then we actually trade pretty evenly in the ensuing fight despite our far higher melee stats. Along the rest of the enemy's line to the side of the fort, well, we're doing pretty much the same thing, just going to charge them from the front. Was expecting to see good results. I think I wasn't really appreciating the fact that Gran Columbia are kind of a major faction because they're an offshoot of one. So they do have good units, including lots of quality line infantry and grenadiers and stuff. Still, is it going to be good enough? Because our charging cav are pretty good too, and after the charge, they're decent in melee. Some of the units in here were only frontiersmen as well, which I think are like below militia tier units. I'm not quite sure. Maybe they're worse at shooting but better in melee or something. I feel like they're trash, although I've never actually used them. As you can see, things start to go our way. We break apart a few units with a few charges, but more and more stuff comes out of the fort, and this fight just goes on and on. They throw in some cuirassiers, some good melee cav, and we're going to try and out-melee cav them with our Sipahis. Others make a run like this one to hit the line infantry. Even things like a one-on-one fight where we can't necessarily beat them are still good for us to take because it will stop the line infantry shooting into the melees, which will probably make things worse due to the morale shock that gives you. So that's all good. Still haven't beaten those militia even after trading in a second unit of Sipahis to help out. Elsewhere we're taking out a few bits and bobs and some artillery around the fort. In the endless fight we take out their general somewhere. And with this, things are going to go our way. We see a couple of routes starting off after that. We still need to grind through a whole bunch of stuff, including some really surprisingly stubborn militia units that seem to very much enjoy being in melee with my Sipahis. But yes, the deed is done now. We can get a couple more death balls to outflank everything and wipe stuff off the field, and once those main bodies of infantry are down, it was just the odd unit hanging around, marauding about, and the death ball is back in action. That's more like it. Our Sipahis can enjoy chasing down some far inferior foes. Never pick on someone your own size. That's the golden rule. Get a pretty decent standard looking result, and it's a result that again doesn't really matter, because after this we just pop an auto-resolve, take the town, and that's going to be the end of that war and the end of Gran Columbia as a faction. We've taken a pretty decent and high level city here in the Americas, but we're not going to do anything with it in particular. I don't plan on actually conquering this area. There are some places we could take, like all of those pirate territories. There are rebel territories around as well. The Polish are here for some reason, so they'll help us out maybe with this. But yes, we're not going to focus on that for this campaign. What we are going to focus on though is what I wanted to do to finish this campaign off. I thought really before I can leave this campaign, I have to go back and attack India. It occurred to me that I can take all the armies I had in Russia and actually start walking to India. I've got military access with the Persians and the Ottomans, so I can walk across some continually open territory and get to the edge of the Mughal Empire, and even get quite close to their capital right as the war starts with this technique. So that's kind of what I started doing. I started gathering up all the armies that were around Russia and moving them to Dagestan, which will be our staging point for this invasion. There was one extra detail that I wanted to sort out for this, and that was to deploy an army of a composition I'd been thinking about, because in this game you can make generals units for free at any time. Sorry, not for free, you can make them for money at any time, but you don't need a building, that's what I meant to say. They're also pretty cheap in terms of upkeep, these war elephant generals bodyguards. So what I'm going to do is we take some trash here and we start promoting all of these trash guys to general, and this transmorphs them into elephants. So with a little bit of genetic engineering, we can spit out a full stack of elephants on the fly. So I thought, well, let's start off by taking our stack with us for the invasion. So we're going to have 3 or 4 armies here, a couple of regular armies, and the stack of elephants. One thing I came to appreciate pretty quickly though was that it's really far from Dagestan to India. You kind of forget, because it's on the edge of the map, it doesn't really look like it. But it's actually a massive distance to walk there. It's the same as walking across all of Europe, really. So, with that in mind, I thought maybe it would be faster to actually walk backwards to, like, the Crimea and take ships to get there. And then I thought, well, we're rich, we've got loads of armies, including reserve armies, and one standing in the Crimea in fact. Let's just have our land invasion gradually walk there, but in order to actually get something going a bit sooner, let's also spit out some new armies, grab our reserve armies, put everything on ships, and do a naval invasion as well. So here we are a couple of turns later after I've organised something like that, starting to send ships all the way around Africa to go and invade India, really just copying what the Mughal Empire were doing to us. It's time to reverse Raj them or something. I don't even know what we're doing at this stage. But yes, it's a little bit difficult actually to deploy ships for a couple of reasons. There's all kinds of lag because in Darthmod the range of ships is extended beyond like what the game engine can even handle, so that's why the green area is completely glitched out all the time. And it means you keep dropping frames and it doesn't detect your mouse clicks and stuff. So with a lot of difficulty, I eventually deploy a whole bunch of ships with a whole bunch of troops to go around. And of course we want to send a whole bunch of ships as well as the troops, since we do know the Mughals have stuff in the sea. They keep deploying fleets against us. We're going to do another long walk project there in South America, walking to North America to fight some rebels or something. I don't know if anything will come of that. And there goes our grand march across Persia. Of course, our naval invasion will arrive much sooner, so we're pretty much going to forget about those guys that are walking for a while now. Here we are with these ships setting up to land, and as for where we're going to land, I thought the best place, the most symbolic place, should be at our old capital, so we can take that back as soon as possible and use that as our main base of operations here. It is actually defended. It's got a stack and a half sitting here, so not sure what they were waiting for. Maybe they anticipated me coming back at any moment. We land an army and besiege, and then we land our second army, the one with all the elephants in it, to attack the army outside the town. I'm not going for a siege draw out here, going to play things nice and safe really. We ought to resolve that battle. It's actually not very good at all, but we're just going to take that because I was predicting we'd have time to just get all of our troops back before we need to worry about the enemy sallying here. Before I landed the third army, I started moving the ships around. I ought to resolve an enemy ship nearby, and then noticed while trying to blockade their trade port here that they have two more armies in ships. Looks like they're preparing more naval invasions, and there's a third army in the docks there. What I should have done at this point is send all of my ships to attack them, because we could take them out while they're on the sea. But I was being very conservative with my ships. Instead, we land the third army and then I start gathering the ships together. What I wanted to do is have all the ships be in a port, so they couldn't possibly be spammed by a whole bunch of ships that I couldn't see. That's the main thing I was worried about, but this turned out not to be too much of an issue. But we're going to be defending against it anyway. So there I ought to resolve and take Goa, and now I can move the whole fleet down to Goa's ports, repair the damage from that auto-resolve I didn't show, and just wait there to see what we can do with that fleet in the future. But the reason I mention all this is the fact I didn't go after their naval invasion force means they can actually just naval invade right here. They can deploy it against us, so immediately the force at Goa is facing a stack that has landed and now we have the chance to intercept. Figured we might as well intercept them because they're probably just going to siege attack us in a second. And the enemy have the advantage here. It seems their troops are actually pretty good. I think the issue is they've got a lot more of their actual musketeer unit than their trash unit, which they usually bring. And their regular musketeers are actually quite a high stat unit. They're just not that good at shooting. The battle starts with my artillery killing some of their elephants on the flank there. Unfortunately, not the elephants I needed to kill, who are right at the back there. So we're going to be focusing on trying to get those elephants with my left wing, while my right wing is charging in to attack some stuff that has separated off from the enemy's main position. We drove the enemy's elephants here away quickly, and then we start ramming into these musketeers. But yes, it doesn't do that much. It's kind of similar to ramming into upgraded line infantry. I think these guys do have higher base stats in melee than line infantry, but they also have swords in melee, so they don't benefit from bayonet upgrades, whatever those actually do to your stats. Therefore, I don't know how this compares really. But it seems to be difficult. We certainly can't rout them by charging into them or anything like that. We have to start gradually killing them, taking casualties in return, and we are using some of our early game units still in this army, so no real advantages there. What I really need is more cav to do outflanking, but I've sent a full like 6 or 7 units of cav to be dedicated to going after their general, which I think is too many, but for whatever reason I decided to send everything to focus on that and have just a few units doing the actual fighting, it seems. We do manage to get through a couple of enemy units, and I'm doing some cycle charging here to reduce casualties, especially after seeing how ineffective the charges were being. Those dervishes there are a nice target for charging because they have no melee defense stats, and there is a little bit of trash here we can charge as well. So we can gradually take this army apart, especially because most of their stuff were just left around near their artillery at the back and weren't really attacking us. We do have one random move that I made. I sent some light infantry to capture this building in the middle. We lost about half the light infantry on the way to cavalry attacks. That was utterly pointless, but I enjoyed myself doing it, I suppose. And now here's what I'm really trying to do. We need to take down this general, so I'm trying to charge in with the lancers to get a kill on these elephants. The elephants have pretty good melee stats, so we are just going to grind unfavourably against them and try to beat them with sheer numbers. Looks like we're still taking out units one by one over here, and the enemy's unwillingness to deploy most of their stuff into the fight is counterbalancing my unwillingness to do the same, so that's all going pretty well in the end. They did send one unit to go and attack my artillery, defended by 2 squares of infantry. They're enough to hold off the enemy, although we lost about half our infantry fighting against their cav. They seem to be pretty good, those Mughal Empire lancers. At least my lancers have now taken down the enemy's general. It's time to get this thing going. One unit was already in the enemy's main blob to stop their artillery from firing for a bit. These other units out on the flank are going to rout with the loss of their general, and we'll start pulling everything into one big blob. It really was a big blob, because I just kind of barreled down the hill with all of my general assassination cav into a big blob of enemies that have formed up. They've got all their units standing on top of each other. We're going to have no sophistication here whatsoever. My only plan was to lock them in place with the blob from one side and bring in another blob from the other side to try and grab some routes, especially because their general's dead. I thought this would be enough. But this fight isn't that good actually. We're losing massive amounts of our cav. It's pretty hard to tell in the replay here, but we're losing a lot of stuff fighting in these blobs. Here's a case where I ran through an enemy unit using a movement order to get some men ready to charge into the blob again. This charge grabs a few extra kills and probably debuffs the enemy's morale a little bit. We get the routes and take those units out there, but as I said, we have lost quite a few of our cavalrymen doing that very unsophisticated strategy. After this, here's a chance for a real death blob moment. You can tell what I'm going to do here. Just selection box this entire pile of cav and order them all at the same time to attack these musketeers with zero sophistication. Again, I thought this might actually be enough because their general's already dead. A couple of charge bonuses applied to these guys might give us enough casualties to make them leave. But no, it actually doesn't, so we have to grind them out after that and gradually kill them. There were a couple more units behind them as well, but after killing a few of them, we get a chain rout and everything runs away. I'm going to chase them down, of course, and continue the battle to make sure we get maximum kills. There's the commander of our light infantry having fun on the roof of that building, watching it all go down. So yes, by the end, we've killed a massive number of enemies, but we did lose about half of our total army, or nearly half. Not very good. And that's a problem because of what happens immediately after. A small army appears from the south and makes a siege attack against Goa, but they've also landed another stack next to it. So now my depleted army is going to be facing a little bit of a challenging situation, and one that's annoying because it was perfectly preventable. If I'd taken out all of their ships, they probably couldn't have done this, or at least not quite so effectively. So yes, maybe the Mughal Empire finally has a chance to actually grab a win against us, or a substantial win. Is my naval invasion going to be too weak to actually pull this off?